Hi, Ann.
Hi, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. You're a reasonable facsimile of Mickey Kaus in certain important respects. Of course, he's the usual counterpart you're filling in for.
Yeah, you know, I would have showed up to see if I could see Mickey Kaus this week, but since I'm on the show, I know that disappointment won't occur to me, but so I'm just the face of disappointment for millions of other Blogging Heads viewers, and I apologize for not being Mickey Kaus.
Oh, Ann, I think we need to work on your self-esteem.
I'm working on it.
I think, you're in certain respects, as I said, I think you're a perfectly adequate substitute for Mickey, although those are large shoes to fill. One thing I mentioned to you is that, in general, in filling the slot in the last few weeks while Mickey was on summer vacation, and I should say next week he'll be reporting from the Democratic Convention.
Ah, cool.
But in general, I've tried to choose people who I thought would antagonize our more liberal commenters about as much as Mickey does.
Good.
And in hopes that they wouldn't miss him as much. And I think, if
people
you work
need that
on
stimulation.
That's an achievable goal for you.
I'll do my best.
Okay, but one great thing about you is I've noticed you're not afraid to just wade into the comments section and slap them around a little when they get out of line.
Yeah, they better watch out.
Yeah.
I'm coming in there.
And I actually think some of them kind of like being slapped around a little.
Yeah, do I have to stop this car and come back there, or whatever the parent says? What is that? What is the famous line? Do I have to stop this car? Anyway, you know what I mean.
I'll remember the exact famous line by the end of the dialogue, I'm sure. Okay, so we were going to talk about, you've blogged a lot about this appearance of McCain and Obama at the Saddleback Church, Rick Warren's church.
Yes. You know, when I first saw on Saturday afternoon that they were going to be on the same stage, I was shocked because I hadn't heard anything about it. And it's sort of like, well, this is the first debate between McCain and Obama, and I'm just hearing about it on the same day. And then I saw, they're actually going to come out one after the other. So then I thought, well, no, I'm not even going to watch it because I don't even care. It's just another dull interview. But then I got kind of excited about it, and it actually was quite interesting, and I live blogged the whole thing. I spent hours writing about it Saturday night. That's what I do on Saturday night.
Now, I was kind of on quasi-vacation, a working vacation, so I wasn't very in touch with the media. Did it get a lot of actual play? Was it broadcast live on some network or something?
A little network they call CNN. And they
I've heard of that network.
Yeah, and they put in, and they also simulcast it online, and they had at least an hour of a discussion about it afterwards. And the clips have been going. There were tons of great clips were produced by it because the pastor Rick Warren, the guy who wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, asked them the same question. So Obama was on stage, he answered questions for an hour, and then McCain came out and he answered basically the same questions for an hour. So you could see how they would answer the question when they hadn't heard what the other person said. So it was a really nice juxtaposition.
By some accounts, hadn't heard.
Well, then there's a whole issue about whether...
There's a whole issue of whether McCain was not, in fact, in the cone of silence he was supposed to be in while Obama was fielding the questions, and thus may have had advanced access to the questions.
And then there's a whole issue about whether the Obama campaign floated that insinuation based on pure speculation in order to cover up or distract attention from the fact that Obama apparently isn't considered to have done very well compared to McCain. So there are layers. There are layers to this controversy.
And I've got to say, these days, the Warren people had said there would be a cone of silence in this technological era. I mean, first of all, I would say they have a responsibility to really do that. I mean, this is an important thing. It's on CNN. It has to be fair play. Mm-hmm. We know from past experience that people running for president will cheat. There was the famous James Baker and company somehow got a hold of these briefing books for the debate briefing books for either Dukakis or Mondale, depending on which election this was. But anyway, they stole the briefing books. Mm-hmm. So they don't always play fair. It does seem to me that there was a responsibility to make sure that McCain didn't have access to the questions. And it seems to me they did not really discharge one thing that's become clear, they didn't, is that they don't know for sure that he didn't cheat. It seems to me the Warren people are incapable of assuring us that. And in this technological era, as I was going to say before I interrupted myself, to make sure somebody's not going to cheat in the age of BlackBerry, you've got to not just sit them in the green room. You got to have somebody literally sitting next to them, making sure they don't check their BlackBerry. It would be the easiest thing in the world.
McCain is a man who was a prisoner of war for a long time and held in a cell. Do you really want to create some kind of visual like that of people guarding him, making sure he didn't cheat? I mean, that's kind of ugly. I mean,
well, it wouldn't be on camera. It wouldn't be a visual. I'm talking about in the green room.
But also,
and I'm not saying put a hood over his head, for God's sake.
Cone of silence. Obviously, there was no cone. There was no cone of silence. It's a jocular reference to something that was on Get Smart, where a big plastic dome action.
So one of my favorite shows. But there has to be effective assurance that he doesn't have access to the questions.
Well,
you don't agree?
No, I think that there's a limit to how much you're going to monitor a person of that stature. He was, in fact, en route to the room where he was going to be cut off from communication, but he was en route for the first 35 minutes of it. He was en route, which of course means compared, did he do a lot better in the first 35 minutes than the second 35 minutes? And in fact, both of them were given the first question, so the first few minutes they both knew the question. So maybe you're talking about the second and third question. If he did significantly better on the second and third question, then you might want to presume something. But the mere insinuation that he cheated is itself offensive, or that we have to, monitor these presidential candidates.
I'm just alleging that he's a human being. We know human beings are prone to this. We know any politician running for office is suspect. I mean, in this regard, for all we know, they would cheat. Yeah. I do think it's up to the person sponsoring the forum to make sure there's no cheating. And these days, you've got to be pretty strict to make sure they're not cheating.
I think there's something undignified about having excessive rules like that. And in fact, Obama won a coin flip, so if he could have gone second.
Well, wait, if there was a coin flip, how could McCain have not even been in the building? When was the coin flip?
I think the coin was flipped somewhere. You didn't come and do the coin flip in the beginning. I mean, there was somebody flipped a coin at some point, and Obama won. But in any case, I wanted to say that I put up a poll on my blog. Obviously, it's unscientific, about what if in fact he wasn't in this isolation chamber, and overwhelmingly the possible answer that got the most votes, that got 73%, and I had like 6 possible answers, was the Obama campaign has started this meme to distract us from Obama's bad performance. And in fact, it was actually fairly effective in keeping people from talking about more substantive things.
Okay, but that's actually not an answer to the question of whether McCain cheated. It's possible that both are true. I don't doubt that the Obama people spun it this way. I still think there's a good chance it's true.
It's possible.
Okay. So you agree with me?
I think it's possible that he cheated, but the insinuation that he did is more ugly than the possibility that he did. So I don't see that as being good for Obama. The only benefit to Obama was in distracting attention from his own performance. But at the same time, by doing that, by doing something that looks intended to create a distraction, it really seems as if he's implying that a distraction was needed. In fact, please don't look at the things I actually said. Look at this other thing. Let's have this other dust-up, this other controversy. If he actually thought he'd done a good job, wouldn't he have wanted the discussion to settle down onto the actual substance of the many things that they talked about? So I think they're tipping their hand that they know they didn't do very well.
No, I agree. It's not in their interest to be perceived as spreading this rumor.
Well, he's being a baby, just whining over you cheat. In other words, and another way to put it is, why do you say you cheated? You say that when you think you lost. So it's interpreted by one easy step to the idea, oh, you lost, and you're a whiner, you're a crybaby. That isn't going to work very well, I don't think.
Speaking of crass allegations about McCain's dishonesty, you also blogged about this question of whether he really, this anecdote that he tells in the book about when he was in prison camp, and there was this guard who supposedly showed mercy, and then etched a cross in the sand to signify that he was a Christian. That first appears in a book that was written, I don't know what, 7 years ago or something?
93.
In 93?
I think the date on that book, what is it called? Faith of Our Fathers or something like that?
That's one of them. But
I think it was 93.
And there, I think you're probably right that liberal bloggers, it's an argument they can't win, alleging that it's false. I do
There's
think
a lot
that,
of tone deafness out there on behalf of people who are trying to help Obama, like Andrew Sullivan. I think there's some really sad, just failure to grasp how ordinary people see things.
Yeah, but I actually think it's true that it's an argument they're never going to win. You're never going to know, and you may be right that they're not helping their cause by raising the issue. I do think in reading Andrew's post, he actually kind of convinced me that it's pretty unlikely the anecdote is actually true. I mean, it's all circumstantial, the argument, but I actually thought it was pretty effective. And
you think it's effective to who?
I think Andrew's a special case. He's not just an anti-McCain blogger trying to detract from McCain. I mean, he's also an actual Christian. And there was a phrase in his post about Christian witness. And I think, in a way, it's just an interesting fact that if indeed this happened, and McCain went for, a quarter of a century or a couple of decades without ever mentioning this story, and in fact told the story very much like it, except lacking the Christian dimension, then it is a failure to do what serious Christians are supposed to do, which is take advantage of opportunities to witness, right? To say things that are conducive to the conversion of others, to tell inspirational and true stories.
Isn't there also an idea in the New Testament that you're not supposed to go about parading your religion, that you're supposed to do it in secret and things like that? Of course, he's violated that.
What Jesus says is it's something about don't pray ostentatiously as there's some group he's kind of dissing
Pharisees.
as the so-and-sos. Is it as the Pharisees or the public? Anyway, you're right about that. Don't make a show of your faith.
So I think he may have been modest about withholding, and of course he might have withheld it because he thought his view of American culture at the time was that people don't want to hear religious things of that sort. They want you to keep religion and politics separate. And so he abided by the culture of the time, and the culture has changed, and now it's become more acceptable or even desirable to reveal that some of the things that you do are religious, and so he resurrected the story at that point.
Well, that's one theory, but I suspect it's not the one you actually, when you think about it, believe in yourself. Don't you agree that in all probability McCain is really not a person of especially deep Christian conviction, and he's just playing this kind of stuff up now that he wants to be president?
Well, who do you think is more religious, McCain or Obama? If I had to bet, I would bet they're both atheists.
Atheists? Oh, I don't know about that.
I'm talking about betting. Obviously, I don't know. Everybody always pretends to believe in religion or actually does believe in it. That's part of something you have to do in American politics today, unfortunately.
You know what I thought was interesting, speaking of this? When Obama was in Israel and inserted that prayer in the Western Wall, and someone, somewhat sacrilegiously retrieved it, and its contents were published, it was... I had expected it to be a prayer that... Well, you could argue either way, whether it seems to have been a prayer designed to be publicized or not. Do you remember what it said?
I remember it said something like, guide me and help my family.
Well, it was surprisingly,
like
to me, not kind of large-minded. It was a very traditional, almost old-fashioned kind of prayer. It was like, God, keep me and my family safe. That was like the essence of it,
Yes. Yeah.
It went on a little from that, but it was almost... the opposite of the persona of a kind of liberal, globally minded, bring us world peace. Maybe it got around to that, but the essence of it, as I recall, was like, keep me and my family safe.
So how do you interpret that? One interpretation of that...
Maybe... What's that?
I think one interpretation of that would be that when he does those high-flown speeches, and I know I'm saying what various people like Rush Limbaugh say, but that when he does these high-flown speeches, he's just mouthing the words of others, and he's good at saying them. But when he's actually on his own, he doesn't really have any profound thoughts. And so that's why that prayer, which he actually did write the prayer itself, and it sounds like a child's. So now I lay me down to sleep addendums.
Yeah, but by the same token, it suggests to me that he's actually religious, if you see what I mean. That was the prayer.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right, and it was the prayer of someone who is exaggerating their large-mindedness in their public utterances. It was also the prayer of someone who's like religious in a kind of old-fashioned way, I thought.
Yeah, but what do you make of the fact that he only joined a church after he got to Chicago and started doing that organizing job, whatever it was, and he was told by leaders at that point that he really, because he had to work with various church leaders, and that he ought to affiliate himself with a particular church, and then he went out to pick the church based on what seemed to be his political and sociological goals, not anything to do with religion.
Well, I think I think there's two separate issues. Is he a person of faith, and then B, did he choose the particular church strategically? Mm-hmm. I feel sure that the latter is true and would be for almost any politician. I mean, they don't,
sure. Yeah, I mean, McCain switched from being Episcopalian to being Baptist. Why do you do that?
Exactly.
Because Episcopalian doesn't really seem that religious, and it seems too elite, right?
Well, and also it just doesn't hit the religious right. I mean, from the hardcore religious right, if you're an Episcopalian, you might as well be a Unitarian almost. I mean... Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I've been to various Episcopalian churches in my life, and I find that they basically tend to spew left-wing politics. They actually... that's what I've encountered.
They tend to do that, and it's also a relatively clinical... I mean, these are the wrong words to say it's a clinical, sterile experience to be an Episcopal church, but compared to an evangelical church... Yeah. It's not as cool. Soulful an experience.
No, it's more formal. You don't get heated up about your religion in that place.
It's almost disturbingly Catholic-esque from the point of view of some evangelicals.
Yeah, Catholic without the troublesome Pope.
Right. Okay, so...
Now have we offended some people yet, do you think? But I sidetracked you onto the subject of Obama. The question was whether McCain was pumping up his religion or lying about religion. And I think my point really is I suspect them all of lying about religion. And it's sort of like, oh, what's the point of even arguing? I mean, why not just accept what they say at face value or disbelieve it all or do what I do, which is a kind of a combination of I believe it all and I don't believe any of it. It's all
I agree with you that there's little money to be made or little advantage to be gained by getting into these issues, by criticizing an opponent as being insufficiently or falsely religious or something. Although God knows the right has gotten a lot out of it in the case of Obama. I mean, so I have to take back what I just said because I think they got some real mileage thanks to the Reverend Wright. But
I think the stuff with Wright was damaging because Wright said anti-American things. He was saying political things. And it was the idea that Obama was a member of that church, stayed in that church when such anti-American statements were being made. And it was not about religion at all, that America's chickens are coming home to roost and so on. Well, that's not religion. What was religious about that?
No, you're right. But it did kind of segue into the question of how did he get into this church in the first place. And then he quit the church, which
if he joined it for
I didn't even want to
political
revisit
reasons.
it. It's so horrible.
Yeah, it was pretty ugly.
Now, in this Saddleback thing, one thing that came up and that you blogged about a little was the question of evil. Mm-hmm. And I kind of got the sense that you thought McCain handled the question better. I forget exactly what question Rick Warren, how he had phrased the question.
I have it right in front of me. Rick Warren asked, does evil exist? And if it does, do we ignore it? Do we negotiate with it? Do we contain it? Do we defeat it? Obama said evil does exist. I mean, I think we see evil all the time. We see evil in Darfur. We see evil, sadly, on the streets of our cities. We see evil in parents who viciously abuse their children. And then he went on to say that we should confront it, but we can't completely get rid of it, that's for God, and there will always be evil. But notice what he put out there, this idea of Darfur was the first thing he thought of, not Al-Qaeda, which was the first thing McCain thought of. Mm-hmm. And then he goes on to the streets of our cities, and then parents who abuse their children. And then after he said that we can't really completely erase it, he said something which I think is the most damaging to him, which is, now the one thing I think is very important for us to have some humility in how we approach the issue of confronting evil, because a lot of evil's been perpetrated based on the claim that we were trying to confront evil. So, there's the kind of blame America first sort of thing.
Okay.
This
Although
idea
here,
that,
and of course, then McCain went on to say that we should defeat evil.
Right. Yeah. McCain had this very steely look on his face. He didn't even answer the question, does evil exist? He just went, defeat it. And he said it with this, if you look at the video.
Almost as if he had heard the question in advance?
I don't think that was in the part that he would have heard in advance if he came. I think he would have said that anyway. But is that really what you want to go back to? That McCain must have cheated?
I do think it's...
Because the point is, Obama's answer was bad. If Obama's answer was bad, the fact that McCain gave a perhaps canned-sounding answer is not going to take away from the badness of Obama's answer. So it
I would say if Obama's answer had deficiencies, it was on the sheerly political plane in terms of how it would play, I would say. And whereas McCain's may well have been more politically effective, as you say, but to me it's kind of spooky that what he basically says, when he says, we must defeat evil, well, that sounds hauntingly like George Bush before he got us into the mess in Iraq, saying, this is almost an exact quote, we will rid the world of evil. Anybody who thinks you can do that, I think is a dangerous person, somebody I would not want to have president.
Well,
and do you think we can rid the world of evil, Ann?
No, I think...
Do you think we can defeat it?
No, I don't think... First of all, if you believe in evil, I don't think you probably believe that it's just some sort of substance that can be isolated and eradicated. I think that if you believe in evil, then I would think that what Rick Warren would think about good and evil... And in fact, I've read The Purpose-Driven Life. I read it in preparation for this very discussion.
I met Rick Warren... I talked to him briefly. I heard him talk at TED, then talked to him briefly. In fact, not to brag about my brushes with greatness, but for a few minutes there was a three-way conversation involving me, Rick Warren, and Al Gore. And have you had any brushes with greatness like that?
I talked to McCain in a conference call about how he would make Supreme Court appointments.
Conference call? I was getting FaceTime, Ann.
Well,
they were looking me in the eye.
No, I don't know.
This was like a major brush with greatness.
I had lunch with Justice Scalia and his son once.
Whoa. See, that's something I'd be too ashamed to even mention in public. But whatever.
And then we were both not eating our dessert, and we had a discussion about it that included talking about how to diet.
Okay. Well, that sounds too authentic to be a lie, so I believe you.
And I also talked to him about Tolstoy. Because his son is in the was in the English department here at the University of Wisconsin, so I feel like I had a little discussion with Scalia one time.
Okay, well you're in the running then. You shouldn't drop out of the competition altogether.
But to me, what's important is that we talked about dieting and Tolstoy. So I like to get some examples of you meet someone famous and then you talk to them about something that's not what they're famous for. So if you talk to Al Gore about American Idol, I think that would be cool.
I didn't, so I guess you win. But
what I was driving at some subject that I got... I think that what Rick Warren
you read The Purpose-Driven Life,
yes,
and you think what Rick Warren was after with his evil question was...
I think what Rick Warren would think about this question of is there evil in the world is that the world that we live in is a test that's just an antechamber to eternity, and we're being tested in this world with an eye toward whether we're going to go on to heaven. And so, of course, there will always be evil in this world. That's the test that God has put here for us. And we can't really conquer all that. We can only just encounter everything that comes up in trying to pass this test that has to do with all of eternity.
You're making a good point, which is McCain is on the one hand claiming... You actually made two good anti-McCain points, and I would just like to seize on them briefly. One, as you said, if you really take evil seriously, you don't think of it as some substance that can be isolated and extinguished. So McCain, just in claiming to take it seriously and saying we're going to defeat it, you're saying it suffers from an internal contradiction. Thank you. The other thing is, you're almost saying he can't be a serious Christian if he's saying we're going to truly wipe out evil, because the whole idea is that evil's not going to be extinguished until the return of Christ.
Yes, I think in fact it was a kind of a trick question that Warren, in fact, if you had just read his book carefully, you would know what the answer is supposed to be there. Because, I mean, also, he even in the book, he talks about Satan. In fact, this is some interesting stuff in the book about how, you know, you really can't just be a Christian or on your own. You have to join a church. You have to be with other people. You have to be in fellowship with other people. Because if you're off on your own, trying to be religious, trying to be a good person, you know, trying to deserve to go to heaven on your own, Satan will come after you. If Satan sees you off by yourself, you're going to be a good target for Satan. And he says Satan. So I just think this whole idea of evil, when you're talking about evangelicals, has to do with eternity and God and Satan and much greater things. So neither of them went for that, of course. I mean,
but at least Obama didn't give the wrong answer by saying evil is something we can just get rid of. He said that what by your reckoning, is the thing that Christians should believe, which is that evil will always be with us on this earth.
Right, and I think that the first part of his question was good, but then he had to fall into that sort of lefty cant about how America, that when we try to do good, we end up doing evil. Now, I think, to some extent, he said it, to be fair to him, he does say we need to have some humility, and that we have to be careful that when we try to fix things, we don't make it worse. And in fact, I think people in government should be, it's sort of like, I think back to Ronald Reagan's famous quote, the worst thing you can hear is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. It's sort of like, please don't help me. Some people in government should have an idea that their attempts that good intentions are not enough. And I think especially lefties should be aware of that their idea that they're going to help, they might not help.
Yeah.
Humility. The old humility thing.
Yeah, I think on the... I mean, I'm glad we've established that the surely Christian dimension of this evil question, on that dimension, Obama passes, McCain fails. I'm glad we've got you on videotape agreeing with that, Ann. In fact, being the one who highlighted it and brought it to my attention. Thank you. But
I have taken a vow of cruel neutrality. And all my readers know that I've done that. I have a tag on my blog. I have a post explaining this. I'm not for either candidate. I go after everything.
But in your heart of heart, you are for McCain. In your heart of heart.
I sort of like both of them, and I sort of am cool to both of them. I know one of them is going to have to be president. I'm ready to deal with it. And, I look for the good and the bad, and I'm testing them, I'm trying to write an amusing blog, and I'm an independent person, and I can deal with either of them being president, really. I'm completely...
I suspect you...
I have such equanimity you wouldn't believe.
I accuse you of harboring a secret pro-McCain bias, but...
Why would I do that? Why would I lie? You're accusing me of lying. You accuse McCain of lying, and now you're accusing me of lying. Why can't you just accept...
No. I think it's so secret that you're not aware of it yourself.
This reminds me of my ex-husband used to say that he knew what I thought more than I did. If I would say something, he would say what I really thought, and if I would deny it, he would say, but he knew. He, in fact, knew what I didn't even know yet.
Was he ever right?
Do you really want to be like him? You want to fall for that one?
I just want to know whether he was ever right.
He might have been right. I don't know. He probably knew that more than I did. If he watches this Blogging Heads, I apologize to him. He's a fine person, and he really was very good at knowing the human heart. Are you good at knowing the human heart, Bob?
The human heart. I don't think, I think the human heart. Let's get back to this question of evil. The human heart naturally leads us to that.
Well, that's what evil is harbored in the human heart, right? I mean,
and
there
it is in the heart. But I wanted to... I mean, here's the... You said, Obama said we have to be humble in, kind of pursuing evil and trying to combat it, because otherwise we can wind up committing evil ourselves. I think
a lot of evil's been perpetrated based on the claim that we were trying to confront evil. Now, notice the word claim there. That also indicates that sometimes we say we're going for evil, but it's not really true. It seems to me
I suspect that sometimes that's true.
That will say, we're going after evil because that's what the people will swallow. They'll like that, but really it has to do with oil or some other such thing.
Imagine that. But my question is, what is evil? I think that's a problem in assessing that utterance of Obama's. I think it's clearly a totally defensible point he's making if you substitute bad for evil, right? Sometimes we wind up doing bad in the course of trying to do good, right? Now, but the question is, so what is the difference between bad and evil? And that's where I have trouble with this whole line of inquiry. I mean, people throw around the word evil as if we agreed on what it means. I think we do mostly agree on what bad means, but what does evil mean to you?
Evil implies almost a supernatural, if you're religious, connection to Satan, or if you're not religious, some stand-in for that idea. And it implies that there's something that deserves punishment and that is kind of irredeemable, actually. You know, that, in fact, so if a murderer, we don't just say that a murderer is sick and needs help or is misguided. We say we can kill this person because they deserve to be obliterated from the human race, right? It's a way of justifying squelching that person. So if you want to go to war, you want to go kill people, it's helpful to say they're evil because then it seems to be okay to kill them.
So that's interesting. So to you, it is a form of bad that is not amenable to negative and positive reinforcement, carrots and sticks. You have to dispense with that.
We're removing their
wipe
humanity.
Out the people in question.
Yeah, we're turning them into a sort of, I don't even want to say disease because a disease could be cured. But in other words, there's this substance in them that makes them different from us and eradicable. And we'll be good if we do that.
And irredeemable.
Yeah.
And well, that's interesting. I think that is the way it works at a psychological level, and I think that's one reason it's a dangerous way to think. It's a very naturally human way to think. I think we naturally do dichotomize and put people in this category, and another part of it is so devaluing their welfare. In other words, their welfare is not worth any consideration at all. So any degree of mistreatment of them is to the good. That's part of the psychology of it too. But I think that that gets us into trouble. And in that sense, I think what Obama said is defensible. I mean, if his point is sometimes in pursuing what we see as evil and what may be evil, we wind up with this really simplistic dichotomy, this Manichaean worldview that devalues or completely dismisses the welfare of large numbers of human beings. You know, I think in a way we do get into that mindset almost whenever we wage a war that we think is a good thing. You know, it's like when we're invading, if we're in a war and you think it's good, the standard way of thinking is, okay, if you hear about soldiers on their side who have been killed, that's good, cause for celebration. But if civilians have been killed, that's another question.
But we don't really think the soldiers are evil. We don't think we don't think the soldiers on the enemy side are evil, unless they're Al-Qaeda, right? Unless they cross some kind of a line where they're engaging in tactics of a sort that don't comply with the laws of war. I mean, the laws of war are kind of designed to distinguish the good soldiers from evil soldiers, right? If you catch those evil soldiers, it's different. But, you know, we usually characterize only the leader of the country as evil. So Hitler was evil, Saddam was evil, and therefore we have to go after the whole country. It's too bad because the people could be good, but we have to resort to war. But I wanted to point out in that regard that with respect to Saddam Hussein, the Democrats, or most of the Democrats tend to say he was a bad guy. Right, Kerry would say that, and Obama said that even at this forum. So he didn't say Saddam Hussein was evil. He said, oh yeah, Saddam was a very bad person. He was a bad guy.
That may have been bad politics, but I think that's good policy because when you say this guy is evil, what that implies, in terms of what it activates psychologically, it's that must be wiped out at all costs. And in this case, I think the cost was a significant one to Americans' strategic interest. But we just got these blinders off. He had to go regardless of what was actually happening on the ground, which is that we were in the process of finding out there were no weapons of mass destruction. Yeah. But we were blinded to that fact because this guy was evil. We had to have him. So I totally applaud a politician with the courage to not call Saddam Hussein evil because I think that leads to better policy than than thinking of him that way.
So
even
to
though he was really
you,
bad.
this issue of evil, you want to go with the bad idea. But I think it's sort of something that marks people on the right and the left, whether they're willing to say evil or whether they want to just say bad. But Obama knew who he was talking to. And I think to be more honest, he would have said to the question, does evil exist? No, we actually shouldn't use that label. Some people have gone very wrong, and we need to do things to correct them. But we shouldn't think of, even these terrorist characters as being different from us. We should try to understand them. We should try to work to change them and use methods other than war, not just label them as evil, because that's what you do when you're setting up a military situation. But he couldn't say that. He knew where he was, and there were many other times during that forum when he said things in a way that responded to the way Warren had asked the question and that were designed to make evangelicals feel that there was a bridge to, even if it wasn't a complete bridge, that they could talk to him, that he would be understanding of them. And so I think it was kind of a bone that he threw to them to say evil does exist.
Well, I'm sure they were both conscious of their audience, although the bigger part of their audience was just people watching CNN, of course. But
yeah, and all the YouTubers that are going to find the juiciest clip that they want to rake them over the coals with. That's always fun.
Yeah.
Any single second in there could be taken out and used to try to destroy him, and everybody's trying to do that. It's a frightening world. It's a wonder they can bear to speak at all.
It is. I think only a fool would let themselves, be taped on video and then let the video go up on the web.
Yeah, good point.
Permanently.
And I like the new functionality. It's very easy to take the little clip out and embed it.
You mean our player, new player?
Yeah, we're talking about Blogging Heads now, right?
Right.
Yeah,
you like the new player?
Yeah, it's great. It makes me want to just
that is
a
Brenda Malik Milton production. You'll be happy to hear. Those are the three people who were most involved, and I think it's great. I think it's totally great.
Yeah, because Blogging Heads is so long, and what you want to do is make it interact with blogs, and if you can come in there and get a clip and embed it, that really makes that linkage that bloggers need. That's really what you need. That you're always looking for a visual to put on the blog to vary things, and it's really great that it's easy to take the little clip and do something with it. So go ahead and do what you will. But of course, anyone that goes on the show, it means that they're saying you can take any little thing and do what you want.
And ruin their political prospects.
Embarrass the hell out of me.
Yeah, that's why I've given up on politics. But
I ran across a clip the other day that someone had made on YouTube where it was just, I won't say who it was, but it was one of the Blogging Heads people belching. And it was just like a couple of seconds.
It was on YouTube?
Yeah. Well, the other person was talking.
Who was it, Ann?
I won't say.
Was it me?
No. But the other person was talking, and the person who wasn't talking silently belches in a way that does the whole belch face. And it was... it's actually pretty funny. I'll tell you privately. I don't want to put that
And
out.
far be it from me to want to embarrass any Blogging Heads for belching or anything else, but who was it?
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
He's interrogating.
That's so wonderful. I didn't know about that. I mean, so our branding strategy is really moving forward.
Yep.
But you are one thing I like about you. One of many things is you really get the potential of the medium in that way. I mean, you see the creative potential of the Blogging Heads technology that lets you do exactly what you were just saying.
Yeah.
And and now we've made it easier. But even when it was not quite so easy, you were doing it.
I would go to the more trouble, but I put up 3 clips from the Greg Lowry. Is that how you say his name, Greg Lowry? Am I pronouncing it right?
Glenn Lowry?
Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter.
Right.
I put up 3 clips from that. They did a great...
You did.
They did a really nice Blogging Heads.
That was a multiple
the other day.
embed. They have a great dynamic. Yes, they have a great chemistry.
Yeah. And they talked about Saddleback Forum and Obama a lot, so it was really good. There's a lot of... They were grim, There's a lot of... and that was even before the Zogby poll came out today that showed... McCain 5 points ahead, and that in a poll that was taken before the Saddleback Forum, which I think hurt Obama. So there's some real pessimism growing on the Obama side.
I've long thought Obama faced a much more competitive race than people were saying. And look, I've said this too many times. Never mind. I think I've long thought there was cause for concern on the Obama side. And I think it now as much as ever.
Do you think it's devolved into frantic desperation yet?
No, but I think
he better do a really
good
convention.
In a certain sense, desperation caused the problem. I mean, it was almost as if, although he was ahead in the polls, he felt he kept needing to do things to consolidate his position in terms of making all these kinds of political compromises. And I think those progressively undermined his image, not just in the eyes of the lefties who didn't want to see those substantive compromises, but, you know, it, as so often happens in politics, it just created the image that he's not, you know, that he's not his own man.
There are a lot of problems.
So I thought
going
all
to
along,
Germany,
less desperation is better. To some extent, you know, at least more than you're doing, just go out there and say what you really believe, and people respect you for it in the end. But,
he's so far from doing that. I mean, the Saddleback Forum was a monument to not saying what you really think. Look what he had to say about abortion and same-sex marriage. He was clearly not revealing what he really thought. He was trying to be acceptable to people, but he couldn't say what he really thought, and he came out seeming sort of, you know, dull and professorial. What could be more boring than a professor? You know, and said a lot and garbled a lot of things that a lot of his sentences. You know, I think that I mean, a lot of people, some of the commenters on my blog were saying that the reason McCain did so much better than Obama was that he was able to say, he had the advantage, not of hearing the questions in advance, but of being able to say what he really thought. And Obama couldn't. But your advice to him is to say what you really think?
I didn't see the forum, so I can't really comment. I do think, but I've been giving this advice forever. No politicians ever do it. But if a politician would ever come out and just kind of defy the pollsters to some extent and say what they really believe, people would be so wowed by somebody who...
Well, here's an example. Warren asks, at what point does a baby get human rights in your view? And Obama says, well, you know, I think that whether you're looking at it from a theological perspective or a scientific perspective, answering that question with specificity is, you know, above my pay grade. Now, the question was, when does a baby get human rights, in your view? So there was no reason to bring in the theological and the scientific perspective. The question was, in your view. And the question wasn't, when does life begin? It was, when does a baby get human rights? Now, he was a law professor. Presumably, he has a view of when the unborn child gets rights. And I think that if he were to be honest, he would say, when it's completely outside of the mother's body. And he's not going to say that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I also think the phrase above my pay grade sounds a little crass to some people in that context.
It sounded cold. Now, I wrote a blog post saying I think that what he meant to say there was that's up to God. And he was using, trying to make a sort of folksy expression that referred to God, but it ended up just sounding cold.
I think you're right. There was a way of saying that would have been fine. Like, this is too deep a question for me, a mere human, to purport to know the answer to. I am certainly sure that by X... you know, and you know, that by the time the baby comes out, and that's what I know for sure, and that's what I'm willing to stake my policy on. But I didn't see it, though.
You can't say that. He would be just destroyed for saying that.
For saying what?
Saying that until the baby is completely outside of the mother's body, it has no rights.
Well, wherever, as a matter of policy, as a matter of policy, he wants to draw the line at what, the third trimester?
Well, a lot of people will say he even thinks the baby can be killed shortly if you kill it soon enough after it leaves the mother's body, because there were these three legislative proposals in the Illinois legislature about criminalizing failure to save a baby that had been born alive during an abortion, and he voted against that 3 times. That's really being used against him to say that he doesn't think the child has rights even after it's outside of the mother's body. So he's got a voting record on that. That's pretty harsh.
Yeah,
what's he going to do about that? You'll hear more about it. I mean, that's really going to be bad. Now, I think that what he needs to say, what I would say, and I'm pro-choice, is that since that the decision is such a difficult one, that's why the woman, the person who's pregnant, needs to make it, because for the government to intrude on the inside of her body should be the last thing that you do, and that somebody has to make the decision. It should be her. It's a difficult question, so she should have to go through that philosophical, theological inquiry herself.
No, I agree that, look, a question like that, well, I didn't see it. Judging by your recounting of his answer, one can imagine him having a better prepared answer for what is, after all, a kind of stock question, regardless of the peculiarities in the way it was phrased this time.
Well, Warren was really good because he was able to think of new ways to phrase things. So, for example, when he talked about the Supreme Court, he didn't say, who would you put on the Supreme Court, or what will your standard be, or who's your favorite justice. It was, which justice would you not have nominated? And that's a different way to ask the question. So this question was... And
then Obama's caught flack for dissing Clarence Thomas, but... Do you personally think Clarence Thomas is qualified to be on the Supreme Court?
Is he qualified now, or was he qualified when he was appointed, or what's the
question? Well, say when he was appointed or now. Who knows? He hasn't said anything on the bench, has he, since being appointed? How would we know? I mean,
well,
what is your view?
The idea of talking a lot on the bench is something that has not always been the case, and he states a principled view for why he doesn't speak on the bench, and he goes by the papers. And he thinks it's all well developed in the papers, and I think that his written opinions are excellent. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with them.
Does he write them? Does he write them personally?
Well, I don't know that any of them really write them, but there is a continuity.
Well, if they don't, then there's some question as to whether they reflect on their merits to be, on the Supreme Court, right?
That's true, and I think that we could probably say that about all of them. I don't know. I mean, I have a real problem with the Supreme Court for that reason. They have taken so much power for themselves, and then we don't know how they really exercise it, and it looks like a lot of the work is obviously done by law clerks, so we don't necessarily really know. But if you look at Clarence Thomas's career up to the point when he went on the court, he had as much as a lot of other people who've gone on the court. He was at least a D.C. circuit judge for a year, and he worked in various leadership positions within the executive branch. And obviously he'd gone to Yale Law School, the best law school, whereas, Obama only went to Harvard. But, I mean, how can Obama make that attack? Because the fact is that his resume for being a presidential candidate is even thinner.
Yeah, but look, we all do, in fact, size people up intellectually. And do you doubt that Obama is smarter than Clarence Thomas?
I don't know. I think there are different kinds of intelligence, and I haven't seen Obama really prove. I mean, he speaks in a way that people who have been well-educated speak, and I think, I'm sure he's very smart. He's probably smarter. I don't know. But I think but what gets me is this, why are we talking about why one black man is smarter than another black man, and why was Obama doing that himself? I mean, when Obama talked about Clarence Thomas, he brings up Clarence Thomas first as the justice he wouldn't have appointed, and he says, I don't think he was, of course he caught himself at first. He started to say, I don't think he was experienced, and then he realized, well, if I say that, that's obviously the same accusation can be made against me. But he goes on to say that he wasn't a strong enough jurist or legal thinker. Now, he doesn't say, I think he wasn't smart enough to be a judge, but he almost says it. And then he immediately goes on to say, I would not nominate Justice Scalia, although I don't think there's any doubt about his intellectual brilliance. Right? And then Warren says, well, how about John Roberts? And he goes on to talk about him. He's clearly smart. Okay, so basically 3 justices have been talked about.
Right.
Scalia, well, he doesn't like his opinion, but of course, he's brilliant. Nobody would question that. There's no doubt. And Roberts, he's clearly smart. But Thomas, not strong enough.
So Obama thinks Clarence Thomas isn't very smart. And you're saying Obama should not have said that because Clarence Thomas is black and you should never say that about a black person? Is that your position?
I think he disrespected him.
There are white people who aren't smart, but no black people who aren't smart? Is that what you're saying? Or that's what Obama should act like he believes?
He's making the charge that Clarence Thomas got affirmative action onto the Supreme Court, and it certainly sets up the charge that he got affirmative action onto the presidential track. So what is he even really trying to say? But I think it's offensive. It's a stereotype, a negative stereotype about black people impugns their intelligence. And so do we really need more of that? What are you really trying to achieve there? I mean, Clarence Thomas is smart enough to be on the Supreme Court. Why are we really raising the question of whether the black man is smart enough? And if various people ask questions like that, they're called racist. So why is Obama allowed to do that?
I think what you're saying, and I'm not saying it's not a defensible position, I think what you're saying is if they ask Obama or anyone to evaluate the merits of people on the Supreme Court and they decide that 1 or 2 or 3 of them are not smart enough to be on the Supreme Court, they should only express that view if the person in question is white. Now, if that's your view, fine, but it seems to me that is what you're saying.
No, it's that he went out of his way to single out one person to say that he wasn't smart enough. He doesn't like the other people.
He didn't say, he didn't say he wasn't smart enough.
He all but said it. I think he said
secondly, he's, a pretty, there are not many people on the Supreme Court who ideologically are as far from Obama as Clarence Thomas, right? It's not surprising that he sprang to mind.
Of course. To say ideologically, I'm going to do, and McCain asked the same question, just spat out the names of the 4 liberal justices. So it's obvious what's going on there. Obama is going to want ideologically liberal justices. McCain is wants us to think that he is going to appoint ideologically conservative justices, and we all pretty much know that. They were really just confirming that. But there's no need to, how you say it matters to some extent, but the larger question, who's going to appoint what kind of judges, I think is pretty obvious, although I personally don't think McCain's judges will be as conservative as people may think.
Well, I think Obama's view is that with Clarence Thomas, much more than Scalia, the question of sheer qualification does arise. I think a lot of people believe that. Maybe Obama felt more comfortable saying it because he himself is black, but
right.
But by the same token, I'm kind of reluctant to tell Obama, a black person, what he can and cannot say about black people.
No, but I think that it's worth saying that, if you said the same, you wouldn't say that, you wouldn't disrespect him in ways that are associated stereotypically with racism if he were ideologically on your side. So you're dredging up this old racist category of way to impugn a person because you don't like him, because you don't ideologically agree with him. Why can't you just not ideologically agree with him?
Well, you could, but he was being honest for one thing. We said he should. Said he should be honest more. I said that. His honest view was that in this case, the question of qualification arises. He said it.
Well, I don't think it's completely honest, or he would have come out and said it more directly.
Oh, well, you're kind of hovering between two views. I mean, on the one hand, you're saying he shouldn't have gone anywhere near this territory. On the other hand, now you're saying he should have gone whole hog.
But you were saying he needs to be more direct and say what he really thinks. He has this way of hedging, and I know he's probably gotten a lot of credit over the years for sounding intellectual by talking like that, but I don't think it speaks that well to the ordinary voter. To speak like that sounds like you're hiding something. It sounds like you're maybe being elitist, or it's a little off-putting. It sounds too cool, I do think there's something of a problem like that. But, but there was a problem back in the primaries with when Obama was attacking Hillary, that, she and Bill were saying things that were being construed as, a step away from an actual racist remark. And so the question was, has the race card been played and so forth. So since he wants to be able to say that really can be interpreted as a playing of the race card, he shouldn't do something that's a playing of the race card. And I think that this comparison of the 3 Supreme Court justices with only Clarence Thomas presented as too stupid to be on the court is a kind of a playing of the race card.
I'm surprised to hear from someone from what I think is your ideological part of the spectrum saying that. But anyway...
where are you putting me? I'm right in the middle, Bob. I'm absolutely in the middle.
I misjudged you. But anyway, we've been talking for 52 minutes. I want to say I want to read a couple of comments toward the end. And meanwhile, there's these various non-political topics you mentioned possibly wanting to talk about. So I'm going to mention a couple.
Whatever you want.
And why don't you tell me what you'd like to talk about?
Okay.
Madonna turns 50. The Olympics. That's 2 right there.
I don't really have anything to say about Madonna turning 50 other than it's really not that bad to turn 50. People shouldn't get too upset. But I think Madonna's nice.
I beg to differ. Having done it.
Yeah, me too.
I would just as soon have stayed on the other side of it.
Of course, it's better to be young, but you waste a lot of time when you're young worrying about getting older, and it's really a shame because it's not as bad as you think it's going to be. So don't ruin any of your young years worrying about being old. That's
No, I didn't ruin many of my young years at all. Quite the contrary. If anything, is insufficient advanced planning. But But Madonna, you kind of convinced me. You posted a couple of videos. You kind of convinced me that I should raise my estimation of her.
The videos are great, even if you don't like the style of music. The videos are really path-breaking and fascinating. There's, I have a post with the links to Entertainment Weekly list of like her 28 best or something like that, and they're all just so terrific and different, and they're worth a lot artistically, I think.
See, because my view of her, my dismissive view of her had been, if you asked me to size up a singer, my question, the first question that springs to mind is, what is the quality of their singing? I think you'd agree, she's not a great singer.
Right,
she does not have a great voice.
Well, but she deserves a lot of credit for being a star for 3 decades, producing all of this extremely popular music that's actually very interesting music without even having that good of a voice. It's more of an accomplishment.
That's one way to look at it.
No, but the dancing and the performance and the videos, there's a lot else going on.
So by that logic, the worse a known writer is at writing, the more of our esteem they deserve, and the more time we should spend reading them.
And maybe
precisely because their writing is terrible, but they've become known, we should read them.
Or maybe the stupider Supreme Court justices, the more we should admire him when he actually manages to do his job.
Are you playing the race card again, Ann? But here's the thing on Madonna. It's like, I was dismissive because I had always thought that the secret of her genius, when I became aware of her, and I think when much of the world became aware of her, I still remember the moment. I was in New York. It was the Tower Records. I don't know if it's still there on Broadway, somewhat north of Bleecker. And this was back when there were albums in the window. Remember albums bigger than CDs? And so the image on an album could really get your attention. Mm-hmm. And the album was like a virgin. Do you remember what the image is?
I don't remember what the album looked like, no.
It's Madonna wearing a bra. It's just from kind of bottom of bra up to top of head. And it seems to me
that bother you,
what
Bob?
you want to do... What?
Did that bother you?
What'd you say?
Did that bother you?
Bothering is, I would say, almost the opposite of what it did.
So you liked it? So
it didn't. No, it didn't bother. It did a tremendous job of attracting my attention. That's what any album cover should do, yeah. Or any book jacket. Its job one is get the person to look at it. In my case, succeeded 100%. But at the same time, ever since I've thought, she was was strategically savvy enough to know that you be the first person to put a big image of a woman in a bra on an album cover and call it like a virgin. That's a good way to become known.
So that's marketing. That's part of the brilliance of it. But
it is.
I inherited all these old record albums from my father, who bought a lot of records back in the 50s and early 60s, and he bought a lot of this kind of easy listening music and Andre Castellanos kind of stuff, things like that. And you should see the record covers on some of these. There's some where it's just like a picture of Anita Ekberg in a negligee on the cover. It couldn't be sexier.
I think I remember.
I don't know.
Do you remember the Brazil '66 album?
Oh, the Whipped Cream and Other Delights. Cream? Yep.
What?
Whipped Cream and Other Delights.
I have a great memory for erotic record album
So that
covers.
Stuff's been going on for a long time. Basically...
yeah, but the bra
But something about that bra, you can't get it out of your head after all these years. So that just shows how savvy she is. She's a great marketer.
But anyway, when I saw her videos on your site, I thought, what's most amazing about... Okay, she doesn't have a good voice. But when you see the gyration she's going through on stage, the fact that she has enough breath left to sing at all, to utter a word, is astonishing. She must be in incredible physical condition.
And she's never bad when she does those performances. She puts everything into it. Even when she's like 50 years old, she'll come out and just dance like she still had to prove herself on day one. So she's a hard worker. We like that in America. People who really put in the effort.
Yeah. She can't sing, but aside from that, she's really a great singer.
But that's like an American success story, It's like rags to riches, isn't
That's right.
it? That you took
grit.
And you took what you got, and you made what you could with what you had. You made the most of what you had. That's all the better, isn't it?
True grit. She had, reasonably good-looking attractive body. She did a whole book that consisted nothing of but nude pictures of her, right? And I
It's
think
called
she even got
Sex,
knopfed to publish it, this high-minded publisher.
And it's a
Is that
huge
true?
collector. I have it in the house. I mean,
Do you?
yeah.
Could you FedEx it to me, possibly?
No, I have a son who's a big Madonna fan. I'm telling you about all these members of my family, my father, my ex-husband. Well, I don't know what's coming over me. You're bringing out my stories of my family
Let
today.
it out, Anne. That's what we're here for. Let it pour out.
Yeah, I have one son.
I'll just listen.
I have one son who's a big Madonna fan, and he got the book, and it's actually, you look it up on eBay. It's called Sex. You have to pay a lot of money to get it now. People made fun of her, but it was a big thing, and it did a lot for it. Advanced her career, and she keeps doing things that people will say it's ridiculous to do that, and now she's made a fool of herself, and then it'll turn out to be that was actually a brilliant thing to do. I remember early on she did a performance at the MTV Music Awards in the mid-'80s where she sang like a virgin, and she got down on the floor, and she was in her bride's dress, and in the end she was down on the floor, and she was sort of masturbating on the floor, with the... But,
Sort of. That's the important phrase, sort of masturbating.
But I thought, oh no, now, and I was laughing, now her career is ruined, she's made a complete fool of herself, and yet that is remembered as one of if you made a 20 greatest moments in all of television, that would be on the list, or would be on some people's list. But it was a historical moment. So
you thought she had violated the never masturbate on stage rule to her detriment, but
yeah, but didn't they do that in Afternoon of the Fawn? Wasn't that a sort of a Stravinsky, Nijinsky, or whatever? Didn't he do that?
I don't know.
Isn't that what happens
you're way ahead of me on your knowledge of all of the arts, I
early
think.
modernism?
But I do remember that one record album cover. We should.
Speaking of sex, we should talk about the Olympics and how you keep putting up blocking heads things with people who talk about the Olympics completely in terms of which bodies are sexy enough to justify watching.
You
have at least two up there.
There is gender bias in the Olympics. I haven't watched them, but it does seem to me. Don't you think there are more in the Olympics male physiques that are going to be attractive to the average heterosexual woman than female physiques that are going to be attractive to the average heterosexual man?
Being
and
athletic,
don't you think that's unfair? Doesn't the injustice of it just eat at the core of your being?
Well, yeah, I think some of you have to pick the right sports. What are the sports that make a woman look conventionally feminine? Normally, you would have to work to overcome sort of certain feminine characteristics that have to do with...
Well, exactly. They are a hindrance in many...
Yeah.
I mean,
some
of them.
Yeah. So obviously the men are exaggerating qualities that we think of as masculine. The big shoulders.
Many of them are an asset, yes, in athletic competition.
So yeah, that is. Well, apparently the Olympics are overwhelmingly watched. I think it's at least one of the sporting things that women watch, and I don't know if women watch more than men, but there's a lot of women watching the Olympics. A lot of stuff is pandering to women.
Well, yeah. Now, I haven't been watching them really this year, but can you tell me if my long-standing gripe is once again applicable, which is that the American networks, in doing this flood of human interest stories, focus disproportionately on Americans, whereas it seems to me, in principle, it's an opportunity to get to know these people of other cultures, and you don't have to be like PBS about it. I mean, there's interesting stories out there, and the exoticness of the culture should add to them.
Yeah, I wish they would do that, but I can't really be an accurate reporter because I just use the TiVo and I speed through everything. I can't really accurately say what's being covered. I just go to the things that seem interesting to me, or I have it on with the sound off in the background while I'm using my computer. I'm just not a normal viewer. And since I don't want to watch any of the commercials, they really shouldn't try to cater to me anyway, but... I've gotten a little tired of the Olympics. I don't really, one of the arguments that we have in the comments on my blog is there's some people who like the sports that are determined by, when you cross the line, when you touch the wall, that it's all about the time, and the fastest one wins or the highest one wins. And then there are people who like me, who like the sports that are more complicated and have these arcane methods of judging, and it's all about sort of form and complexity, like the gymnastics and the diving. And people seem to fall into those two groups.
Yeah, well, there are the aesthetic ones where judgment... It's always bothered me a little, actually, when aesthetic judgment comes into play. I like athletic competition where there are the lines and the person who gets across the line wins.
So now I think this is a gender difference point that you might want to examine, which is I think it's the male point of view, or tends to be stereotypically male to like the sports that are determined by a specific number, height, or time, and that it's stereotypically female, or that females tend to cluster around the preference for the sports that have to do with more complex aesthetic form and judgment.
I actually do the women's figure skating. I kind of can get into. Now, do you prefer? Here's an interesting question: Do women and men alike actually prefer female figure skating?
I think everybody likes the female figure skating better. Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, women often like to look at women. They, including
right. There
heterosexual
is the fact that advertisers use women to appeal to women, and they use women to appeal to men. Yeah,
everyone seems to like to look at women, and women look better, don't they? Generally, a lot of people would say. No, not everyone would say
that's certainly been my view.
The thing is that if men would make the effort to look good, they would look as good as women. The problem is that the men don't care enough to try to look good.
I spent hours primping for this very dialogue.
Well, I haven't seen the film yet, so I assume.
And does it ever show? Okay, so speaking of your commenters, I wanted to quickly, I've been, because I have not had, Mickey as my counterpart, we're running overtime, but I just wanted to mention a few comments that have gotten my attention. Well, last one I did was with Jonah Goldberg, and Clay Misher, Claymisher, the commenter known as that, said, "Oh, Bob, you're breaking my heart. Jonah Goldberg? Talk about your noxious little butterball." I just want to say that wins the award for most obscure allusion, signifying the deepest knowledge of my own personal oeuvre. Deeper than your knowledge, Anne, because you don't know what the phrase noxious little butterball refers to, right?
Oh, is that an allusion to something you once said?
That's an allusion to part of my oeuvre.
Oh, yeah?
You don't know which part.
No. Is it about the turkey butterball?
Clay Misher must be swimming in my oeuvre. I once referred to Newt Gingrich as a noxious little butterball, and it annoyed him so much that he whipped out the column and showed it to Maureen Dowd as evidence of liberal media bias, and she wrote about it. God bless you, Clay Misher. But I think Jonah Goldberg, no, he's not a noxious little butterball. You've seen him in person, right? He's not little.
He's huge. He's a whale of a man.
So, no. Oh, and also we should add that he's not a noxious butterball, too, right?
I like Jonah Goldberg. No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, I had to think.
So then you're adding that. But certainly the little part we can completely...
I've done two blogging heads with Jonah Goldberg. One of them got completely trashed because... we had a technical problem, but I really liked doing a blogging heads with him, and I think he's terrific. But I guess he doesn't want to talk to me anymore.
Oh, I don't think we've asked him. We can if you want.
No, I thought he was refusing. I made him turn red, and my commenters still talk about. They say, "Oh, they love the old blogging heads where Althouse made Goldberg turn beet red."
Well, this will be a challenge. I think you've just thrown down the gauntlet.
Yeah. So have him go on with me and see if he can keep from turning beet red.
Red. Now, okay. Here's the thing. Quickly. I said Obama should seize on this meme that Bush, in driving up the deficit with A, the Iraq War, B, the tax cuts for the rich, helped send us down this economic spiral. And Namazu ridicules me, saying, I think I can guess who does the finances in the right household. You can blame Bush for running up the national debt and for failing to adequately regulate mortgage originations in Wall Street. You can't blame him for high mortgage rates for the simple reason that we've been enjoying record low rates for over a decade.
Yeah, you got it wrong on the what the problem is with mortgages isn't that the rates are high.
It is. I mean, here's the point: is that it's a common fallacy. Well, first of all, the commenter known as PE says, on the other hand, deficits can drive up interest rates, and if you have an adjustable rate mortgage, that translates to higher payments, conceivably beyond your ability to pay. And it's the fallacy that I think we see in that first comment is the idea that if something is lower than it used to be, then there can't be anything that was putting upward pressure on it. Okay, so maybe mortgage rates weren't at an all-time high, but they could have been even lower had it not been for the deficit. And when you've got an adjustable rate mortgage and the time comes due, and all of a sudden it jumps up by 2 points, and whatever that rate is, you can't make it, then you would have been better off if the deficit had been smaller and the interest rates were even lower.
Okay, I'll accept that as a good response to the commenter. I think he was unduly cruel
good, because I'm not sure whether it is.
Yeah, well, I don't know enough about why the mortgage crisis occurred the way it did, but I think I guess there's a problem with people. I'm not going to purport to talk about it. I'll just drag this out too long. I'm going to shut up. Anything else?
Well, it also, well, I won't get into it. I'll shut up, too. Except to say that Lamousse posits that there's a distinctive libertarian look, and you have your libertarian inclinations. Lamousse says, I get an ironic, hipsterish feel for BHT libertarians, Wilkinson, McCardle, and Welch. Sanchez, too, but probably Lisa the Four. Do you think this is true?
That libertarians are sexier? Is this the idea?
No, just a particular hipsterish-like vibe in terms of glasses they wear, and even their speech patterns, this person says. I think lots of
it's good to have a hip, young look. It's good for your political branding, and I think there is a problem with sort of lefty liberals that a lot of them look a little, less hip.
A little lefty,
that's good.
What?
Less hip. No, I think...
Oh, less hip.
When this is...
You think people on the right look more hip than people on the left?
I think there's a problem. There are different kinds of people. Like all these politicians that had that same Trent Lott type haircut and that you see on TV, the members of Congress, those kind of right-wing people, that's just terrible branding. But when I walk around Madison, Wisconsin, like if there's a peace march or something like that, the people look like... They've been hippies for decades, They just don't.
I see.
They don't. It seems tired and old.
Well, maybe that's because marching is an archaic form of protest, and the young hip lefties are online mobilizing there.
Yeah. Maybe the whole idea of protesting just isn't what it used to be.
Well, certainly marching. I mean, all the effort, and you might consume some fossil fuels getting to the march or something. Whereas in cyberspace, that doesn't happen. Well, we've gone kind of over, but did you want to say anything about your commenters before we do?
You set up this kind of a competition between my commenters and your commenters. I'm wondering if you thought there was. It's sort of like, how do you judge it? I don't think you can really judge it. Your commenters will be. I don't know. Your commenters do a different kind of thing. I have commenters that go all over the place and say all kinds of strange things. But I think mine are more. I'd like to say that I think that mine are more creative and funny.
More what than funny?
Creative, or more creative and funny.
Creative and funny. Your commenters are more creative and funny than our commenters?
Yeah. Well, let's see them. This is my challenge to your commenters. Instead of just bitching about how you didn't like me for whatever the hell reason you come up with every time, why don't you say something creative and funny and amuse me a little more? Don't make me come in there.
Okay, that's the Althouse challenge. You have laid down the Althouse challenge. We want you to ridicule Anne in a funny way, right?
Yeah, make clips. And take the clips, take clips, put them on your blog.
And make funny comments about them.
And just make sure that when you do a blog post and you use a clip of me, that you link to my blog. That's all I ask.
Well, now I think you're throwing another dimension into the competition. But I'm happy for them to link to you, and we will certainly put a number of your relevant blog posts up in the links mentioned thing. But I think this idea of them commenting on you in a creative and funny way, using dingalinks as well, is a great challenge.
Yeah, as you were saying, use the internet for what it's worth. Don't just grouse and write the same old things you would have put on chat boards back in the 80s. Do something new. Push the envelope.
Yeah.
You can do it at my expense, but do something interesting, not the same old thing.
Yeah.
That's my challenge. I'm with you. Okay, good.
Okay. So this has been great, Ann. Thanks for filling in.
Okay, it was fun, and I look forward to seeing Mickey again at the Democratic Convention.
He'll be reporting, allegedly, from the Democratic Convention. I mean, we've invested huge resources into this effort.
Good. Well,
there's a whole truck out parked in Denver right now that says Blogging Heads TV on the side with the crew.
Oh, good. Wow, exciting. Cool.
Mm-hmm. So thanks, Ann.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.